My name is Earl McKenna, and I've spent 50 years on these waters. I've seen storms that turned the sky black as pitch, caught fish bigger than a man's dreams, and lost friends to the sea's cold mercy. But there's one morning I'll never forget. The morning my boat was pulled by something that even the Navy couldn't explain. It was late September 1987, the kind of dawn where the air tastes like salt, and you know the day's going to be different before you even cast your first. I was out on the Mary Catherine, I named her after my late wife, about 14 miles off the coast of Cape Cod. The water was calm, almost too calm, like the sea was holding its breath. I'd been fishing since 4 in the morning, and by 6:30, I'd filled half my nets with good Atlantic cod. The sun was just breaking through the fog, painting everything orange and gold. Beautiful morning, peaceful, the kind of morning that makes you forget why you ever complained about this life. But then I felt it, not with my hands, not with my eyes. I felt it in my bones, the way you feel when someone's watching you from across a crowded room. The hairs on my neck stood up. My dog, Alik, a good retriever, braver than most men I know, he started whimpering from where he sat near the cabin. That's when I knew something was wrong. The water around the Mary Catherine. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, the God's honest truth. The color shifted from that deep Atlantic blue-green to something darker, almost purple. Not storm clouds gathering, the sky was still clear, but the water itself looked different, thicker somehow, like the ocean was turning to syrup. I checked my instrument. Everything was working fine. The compass spun a full circle, then settled back north. My radio crackled with static. Then a voice, one of the fishing boats 3 miles south, asking if anyone else was experiencing interference. I told him no, even though that was a lie. Then my net started moving. Now nets move all the time when there's a catch, but this was different. The movement wasn't random, wasn't the thrashing of panicked fish. It was deliberate. The ropes were being pulled downward, straight down, with a force that made the pulleys sing. The strain on the winch was so intense, I could see the metal beginning to warp under the pressure. I cut the engine and ran to the rail. What I saw made my blood go cold. The ropes weren't just being pulled, they were being wound around something massive. I could see the shape of it in the water, moving beneath the surface, circling my boat in a pattern so calculated it couldn't be animal instinct. It was deliberate, intelligent. Easy now, I whispered, more to myself than to whatever was down there. A leak pressed against my leg, trembling. Just what in God's name are you? The thing pulled harder. The winch groaned. I'd never heard a mechanical sound carry so much pain. My catch spilled back into the ocean. I didn't care about the money anymore. All I cared about was keeping that boat afloat. And something changed. The pulling stopped for 10 seconds, maybe 15. Everything went quiet. The water stilled. Even the wind died. It was like the whole world was holding its breath again, waiting to see what would happen next. That's when my boat started moving, not drifting. Moving, the Mary Catherine lurched forward with a velocity that shouldn't have been possible. My engine was no wind, but we were being towed, pulled in a direction my compass couldn't quite agree on, somewhere northeast, toward waters I'd never been to. I grabbed the wheel, spun it hard to port. Nothing. It was like steering a toy boat in a bathtub. The controls didn't respond. The boat kept accelerating, cutting through the water smooth as glass, faster than any current could carry us. A leak barked, once sharp and urgent, and that's when I realized I was afraid. Not the normal fear of a bad storm or mechanical trouble. This one deeper, primal. The kind of fear that tells you that the rules you've lived by your whole life don't apply anymore. I looked back at Cape Cod, already shrinking in the distance, and I knew one thing for certain. Something had decided my boat belonged somewhere else, and I had no choice but to follow. The speed didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. Within minutes, we were moving faster than I'd ever traveled on water, faster than a speedboat, faster than anything I'd comprehend. The bow of the Mary Catherine was cutting through the Atlantic like a knife through warm butter, and I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, even though it made no difference whatsoever. The fog rolled in thick and sudden. One moment I could see the horizon clear as day, and the next we were wrapped gray white blankets so dense I couldn't see 10 feet ahead of the bow. The temperature maybe 20 degrees, and as many breath came out in. Alec had stopped whimpering. Now he just stood rigid, staring out into the fog like he could see something I couldn't. That's when I heard it, a sound, not like whale song, not like dolphins clicking, not like anything I'd ever heard in all my years on this ocean. It was a low-frequency hum, almost felt it, more than heard it, that seemed to vibrate through the deck, through my boots, through my very chest. It was the sound of something massive moving through water, something so large that the ocean itself had to rearrange itself to make room. The hum grew louder, more insistent, and underneath it, I swear on my mother's grave, I heard something like words, not English words, not any language I recognized, but words nonetheless, syllables stacked on top of each other in a rhythm that made my brain ache trying to parse it. "What do you want?" I shouted into the fog, my voice cracking like a teenager. "What the hell do you want with my boat?" The hum intensified. The water around the Mary Catherine began to glow. Now I know how that sounds. I've told this story to maybe 3 people in the last 38 years, and every single one of them looked at me like I'd had one too many drinks. But I'm telling you, the water glowed, a phosphorescent, pale blue-green, like someone had switched on underwater lights miles beneath the surface. It illuminated the fog from below, turning everything into this otherworldly twilight. The glow pulsed in rhythm with the hum. Pulse, hum, pulse, hum. Like they were synchronized somehow. Like the sound and the light were part of the same thing, part of the same being. I made a decision that probably saved my life. I stopped fighting. I let go of the wheel. I sat down hard on the deck, my back against the cabin door, and I just accepted it. Whatever was happening, whatever had hold of my boat, it wasn't interested in drowning me. Not yet, anyway. So I sat there, breathing shallow, and I waited. The boat's speed began to slow, not gradually. It went from that impossible velocity to a complete stop in maybe 10 seconds. The deceleration so sudden, I nearly went flying forward. My chest hit the rail. Alec yelped, scrambled across the deck to get his footing. The fog began to clear. What I saw when it lifted will stay with me until the day I die. The water around was absolutely still, not calm, but still, like someone had frozen the ocean mid-motion. It was mirror smooth, reflecting the gray sky perfectly so that I couldn't tell where the water ended and the air began. And in that mirror, in that impossible stillness, something moved, a shape, a silhouette. It rose from the depths about 50 yards off the starboard side. It wasn't a whale. I've seen whales, humpbacked, blue whales, even a few grays. This was different, wrong somehow. The shape was too angular, too geometric. It moved with an intelligence no animal I'd ever encountered possessed. And as it rose, water cascaded off its surface in sheets, revealing something that my mind couldn't. It was corroded metal, barnacle, covered in what looked like a century of ocean growth, but definitely, unmistakably metal. The shape of it became clearer as more of it emerged. A hull, a ship's hull, but not like any ship that ever sailed these waters. The thing that rose from the ocean was roughly the size of a fishing trawler. Design was all wrong. The angles, the surface was covered in marking, symbols or writing, I couldn't tell which, that seemed to shift and change when I tried to focus on them directly. It rose higher, higher, until finally a section of it, a hatch maybe, or a door, began to open. That's when the smell hit me. Have you ever smelled something so foreign, so completely other, that your body reacts before your mind can process it? That's what this was. It wasn't rotting flesh or chemical fumes or anything I could properly describe. It was like the smell of deep ocean trenches, sulfur, brine, something ancient and wrong. A leak started vomiting over the side of the boat. I gagged, my eyes watering, and then came a beam of illumination shot out, not like flash beam, but more like solid lighted, thick and tangible. It swept across my boat, and everywhere my instruments went. The compass spun wildly. The radio started broadcasting every station at once, a cacophony of voices and music and static all screaming at top volume. The engine, which I'd shut off hours ago, suddenly roared to life and just as suddenly died. The beam reached me. It touched my face. Explain what happened next. It wasn't pain, exactly. It was like every nerve ending in my body was suddenly aware of itself, like electricity running through my veins, but cold instead of hot. My vision went white. I heard that humming sound again, but this time it was inside my head, not outside it. And I heard those words again, those non-words, clearer now, almost like they were being translated for me. You are witnessed. You are marked. You are remembered. Then it was gone. The light cut out. The beam withdrew. The ship, or whatever it was, began to sink back into the depths as quickly as it had risen. Within seconds, the water closed over it like it had never been there at all. The stillness broke. The fog rolled back in, and the American drifted. We were maybe 3 miles off the coast of Cape Cod, in waters I recognized, with nothing but the fog of gentle waves to mark what had. Alec was still retching. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel, and in my mind, playing over and over like a record stuck in a groove, were those words, "You are witnessed, you are marked, you are remembered." I didn't know what they meant. I didn't know what had just happened. All I knew was that whatever it was, it had changed something fundamental inside, something that could never be changed back. The engine started on the first try. I aimed the Mary Catherine toward home, moving slow through that fog, not sure if I was running toward safety or away from it. Behind me, something in the depths began to hum again, but this time I didn't look back. I made it back to harbor around noon. The fog had lifted by then. Sky was clear as glass, the kind of day that makes you forget anything strange ever happened. Except it did. I knew it. The first thing I did was call the Coast Guard. Not because I thought they'd believe me, but because protocol demanded it. I reported a mechanical malfunction, strange readings on my instruments. Nothing about what I'd actually seen. The officer on the line seemed bored. He asked if I needed assistance. I said no. He told me to file a report at the station. That was it. But someone was listening. Within 2 hours of me tying up at the dock, 2 men in Navy uniforms, not local Coast Guard, actual Navy. They had credentials and hard faces, and they asked me a lot of very specific questions about where I'd been, what I'd seen, whether I'd noticed anything unusual. I stuck to my story. Mechanical trouble, strange instruments, nothing more. They didn't believe me, but they couldn't prove otherwise. One of them, a commander named Reeves, he looked at me for a long moment after I finished talking. Then said something I'll never. "Mr. McKenna, we've had 3 other reports from fishing vessels in that same area over the past 6 months. All of them describe similar instrument failures. All of them happen to occur in a very specific zone off the Cape. We're investigating a possible underwater anomaly. If you remember anything else, anything at all, you call this number." He handed me a card, just a phone number and the name Naval Intelligence Division. No address, no real information. I never called. Over the next week, I heard rumors. Other fishermen talking in hushed tones about ships that had gone missing in those same waters, about a fishing boat called the Patience that disappeared without a trace 3 years prior, about strange equipment that the Navy had been deploying off Cape Cod for the past year. Nobody knew much. Nobody wanted to know much. And then the dreams started. Every night, without fail, I'd find myself back on that boat, back in that fog, and I'd hear the humming, and I'd see those impossible symbols on that corroded metal hull, and I'd feel that beam of light touching my face. But in the dreams, I could understand the words. They were clearer, more urgent. Come back, come back, come back to the deep. I'd wake up covered in sweat, my heart pounding like I'd been running. Alik would be whimpering from his spot by the door like he was having nightmares too. By the end of that first week, I was barely sleeping at all. My sister Margaret, she's a therapist down in Boston, she came to visit about 10 days after the incident. She took one look at me and knew something was wrong. The weight I'd lost, the dark circles under my eyes, the way my hand shook when I tried to hold a coffee cup steady. "Earl, you look like hell," she said, sitting down across from me in my kitchen. "What happened?" I almost told her. God knows I wanted to. What could I say? That I'd seen something impossible? That the Navy was investigating something they wouldn't talk about? That every night I dreamed of voices calling me back to the ocean? Instead, I lied. I said I'd been sick, flu or something. I was fine now, needed more rest. She didn't believe me either. She didn't push. She never did with me. The calls started 2 weeks after the incident. Phone calls in the middle of the night, always from that same number that Commander Reeves had given me. They never said my name. And then that humming sound, that same low-frequency hum I'd heard in the fog, and underneath it, swear I heard whisper words in that non-language. The phone would go dead, and I'd be awake the rest of the night. I tried changing 3 times. Each time, within a week, the call would start again. The 3rd time I changed it, I didn't tell anyone the new number. No one except my doctor, my sister, and the bank. I thought maybe I was losing my mind. I went to see a psychiatrist, not on my own, but because Margaret made me go. He prescribed pills, told me I was experiencing trauma-induced paranoia and sleep deprivation. Recommended I take a vacation, get away from the ocean for a while. I didn't take the pill. I didn't go on vacation. Instead, I started researching. I went to the library in Provincetown, and I started looking through old newspaper archives, microfiche back in those days, squinting at screens for hours on end, and what I found was impossible, and yet it all made sense. 1952. A Navy destroyer escort called the USS Piper reported strange underwater readings off Cape Cod. The report was classified. The ship was decommissioned 3 years later, 1964. A fishing vessel vanished without a trace. The official report said mechanical failure, but the crew had reported strange lights and sounds the night before they went missing. 1971. A submarine, an actual military submarine, was said to have encountered unexpected geological phenomena in the same area. 3 sailors had to be institutionalized afterward. The official cause listed was deep-sea decompression sickness, but the dates didn't match up with any dive-log. 1978. Another fishing boat, same story as the one in 64. Strange lights, sounds, then nothing. And then 1987, my encounter, the 4th in 35 years, if my count was always in the same area, always in the fall, always following the same pattern, strange instruments, humming sound, something that couldn't be explained. I found one more thing buried in a newspaper from 1952, a small article, easy to miss. A researcher named Dr. Edmund Hartley from MIT had been working on a project called acoustic anomaly detection for the military. The article mentioned that he believed there were non-terrestrial sonic phenomena occurring in specific underwater locations along the Atlantic. He was interviewed about a breakthrough in his research, but the article cut off mid-sentence. The next week's papers made no mention. I searched for 3 hours and couldn't find any follow-up. It was like someone had deliberately scrubbed him from the record. I never found out what happened to Dr. Hartley, but I have my theories. That was 38 years ago. I'm 71 years old now. I haven't been back out to that zone off Cape Cod since. I couldn't if I wanted to. My hands shake too much to captain a boat safely anymore. Alik died 15 years ago, but I'd like to think he's somewhere peaceful now, free from the nightmares that plagued us both. The calls stopped after about 6 months. I don't know why. Maybe they got what they wanted from me. Maybe whatever that thing was in the deep, it decided I wasn't worth contacting anymore. Or maybe, and this is the part that keeps me up some nights, maybe it's still calling, and I've just trained myself not to hear it. I've never told anyone the full story. Not even Margaret knows the tale. I've kept my mouth shut because there are certain truths about this world that aren't meant to be shared. Certain things that live in the deep, in the places where sunlight doesn't reach, that our minds aren't equipped to understand. But I'll tell you this, the ocean isn't what we think it is. It's not just water and salt and fish and currents. It's alive. It's conscious, and it's been here a lot longer than we have. Sometimes when I'm sitting on my porch at sunset, I can hear that humming again, not through my ears, through something deeper, through whatever part of me got marked that day in the fog. And I know that thing is still out, still waiting, still calling. Some nights I almost answer. Some nights I wonder if that wouldn't be the most thing in the world, to finally go back to where that beam of light found me, to hear those impossible words spoken in a language my soul understands, and to let the ocean take me home. But I don't go out yet anyway, because here's what I learned. In all my years on these waters, the sea doesn't give back what it takes. It only marks you, changes you, leaves you standing on the shore wondering if what happened was real or just the lonely ravings of an old man with too much time and too much silence. You are witnessed, you are marked, you are remembered. Those words, they mean something different to me now than they did that day. They're not a threat, they're a promise that somewhere out there in the deep, something hasn't forgotten me. Something still knows my name, even if I've tried to forget its own. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us really want, to know that someone, something, remembered, that we weren't just through, leaving nothing but ripples on the water that fade away. The ocean, that's what I've come to understand. The ocean always. The lesson I've learned from this encounter is simple, profound. There are forces in this world far greater than ourselves, and not everything can be explained by science or logic. Sometimes the most important truths are the ones we can never fully prove. What matters isn't whether you believe my story, it's whether you're willing to accept that the world is stranger, deeper, and more mysterious than we pretend it to be. Life isn't about having all the answers. It's about living with the question, about respecting the unknown, and about understanding that we're never truly alone. Something always remembers. The mark we leave on this world and the mark the world leaves on us, that's what makes us human. That's what makes us real. My name is Earl McKenna, and I've shared this story with you because some things need to be heard. If you felt the weight of the ocean in these words, if you understand that there is more to this world than meets the eye, then I ask you, subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. Let me know that you too believe in the mysteries we can never fully solve. There are more stories where this one came from. Stories of the sea, of men, of things that defy explanation. And I'll keep telling them as long as you keep listening